don't call me a cartographer because all these cartographers will be like, what? Those maps aren't accurate, you know? So map maker's a little bit looser than cartographer.
Now, you may have picked up a new hobby over the course of the last year. There's a lot of those pandemic pastimes that people picked up, whether it's roller skating or baking or any number of other things. But did that hobby become a full-time job? Well, that's exactly what happened to Isaac Dushku. He's BYU's Student Entrepreneur of the Year, and he turned that pandemic pastime into a full-fledged business. And so last summer, with a sheet of regular old printer paper and a pen, he sat down to doodle a fantasy map of Utah. Then he snapped a photo, put it online.
I was like super nervous and hit send or whatever. And only one person was like, hey, I'll buy that. And it was just this little like piece of printer paper with a kind of a fantasy sketch of Utah on it. I was like, wow, if you're gonna buy this, then maybe I should like draw a bigger one, make copies of it, and try to sell it as like kind of like a side hustle. So I started that, and then pretty much with almost no delay, like tons and tons of requests started coming in, right? Like, oh, I would buy it if you guys had, they'd always refer to me as like you guys, as if I wasn't just like some dude, like drawing maps in my my basement. But they wanted Washington, they wanted, Texas, California, and essentially it hasn't slowed down since then. And that was exactly a year ago.
And the orders haven't stopped. Isaac says this whole experience has given him an interesting look into states across the Union and into countries around the world.
I kind of get to see like what maps or what people have the most state pride. So for example, Utah has a population of like around 3 million, and Illinois has a population of like 10 bazillion, right? They have Chicago, they have infinitely many more people than we do, and the Utah map does like significantly better. That could be because of mountains and stuff, but it also could be because like we love our state. It's just kind of these funny little things I get to see. It's like, no, like people in the Pacific Northwest like love their states. People in the Midwest, like, depends, right? Like there's a ton of Minnesota pride. Illinois is a little bit struggling. Indiana, recoups that. New Jersey's pretty good. There's like that one surprised me because they kind of get a bad rap, but it's fun to see that. But nothing compares to the West. Like the people in Washington, Colorado, Oregon, and Utah just like love their states so much, almost at a Texas level.
Isaac says this business has been able to blend in a number of his interests and hobbies all into one concrete thing, and over the course of a year where not much travel happened, he was still able to go and figuratively visit all of these places and experience the cultures from around the world.
If I'm doing a map of Minnesota, I pull up like 50 different maps on Google, and then I pull up Google Maps, like the satellite view, and I just like zoom in and zoom in, just like, wow, there's so many lakes in Minnesota. And I just like look around, and then I'll type in like top 20 things to see in Minnesota, and basically spend way too much time researching the state. And then I rely really heavily on my Instagram following. I'm just like, hey, anyone from Minnesota? And then these people, it's like, I don't know, the chance of a lifetime they get to just like splurge all their hometown secrets and stuff. And basically if you comment on one of my posts, like it goes on the map. Like even if it's like insanely niche, like I don't know that. And so some people have like towns of 200 people on it and stuff, and someone else's town of 20,000 didn't make it, but because they reached out, like you made the map.
So after all of the Instagram comments and all of the research, the time finally comes to sit down, put pen to paper, and start making some maps.
So I'm a pretty simple dude in terms of like the tools I use, but I grab like a giant piece of paper, just like this, and I got this nifty table behind me that goes up. Got it on Amazon. I was drawing on a ping pong table in my parents' basement for months and months. But essentially, the weapons I use, like I would start with a pencil, kind of the outline. The outline's like super key because if you get that wrong, the whole state kind of falls apart. My early maps, not the most accurate in terms of outline. But then I just use like these normal pens you can get at Walmart, right? Because Walmart's never going to run out and stuff. It's not expensive. And I use black for all the physical labels for the mountains, the rivers, everything. And then the red for the labels. And that's it. It's just like, I start off with the outline. I get kind of like the rough, bigger picture. I go crazy on the mountains. And then I do the letters. And then the final kind of filler is I do the trees, and it just kind of spreads all over the mountain or all over the map.
And with just those simple tools, Isaac's able to capture all of these places that we call home.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we're going to resonate with something that's home, but on the same hand, like we resonate or we're interested in something that's not home, that's something completely different, and especially like during, if you're like trapped inside your room during the COVID-19 pandemic, like you crave an escape of some sort, right? Like you can find that escape through, hours and hours on Instagram. But there's people for thousands of years that have just like looked at maps for hours and hours. And they're just like, wow, there's a place in Indonesia, called Bali, right? Like I wonder what, or they're just looking at things, or they go into Google Maps and they just like zoom in on some random part in Africa. They're like, wow, people live there, And for me, it's always provided like, this kind of interesting little journey you can have in your brain inside your room, just looking at, either a physical piece of paper or a map on the screen. But there's nothing quite like having a physical map. It's like, this is like someone's home. Somebody lives here and I know nothing about it. And so I'm just going to learn. And then the moment you learn a map, you feel cool because you're like, oh, I know exactly where, Bangladesh is or something like that.
Well, that just about does it for me here this week. Thanks for sticking around. Well, I really do appreciate it. You can find out even more about Isaac and Lord of Maps and see even more of his beautiful work over on our website at kslnewsradio.com. Thank you once again so much for watching. If you've got any good news from around the state that you think we should hear about, I want to hear about it, drop it in the comments below or shoot us an email. I think all of our stuff should be, wait for it, right here. For KSL News Radio's Heart of Utah,
it started with this girl, I think she's 11, and she had heart cancer, but now she's back in my school. And before she was back in my school, I wanted to help her and her family. So I am raising money.